Hello to all of you, and welcome to Madrone Hospice's Light Up a Life for 2022. My name is Chris Clother, and I'm the Executive Director here at Madrone Hospice. And I'm honored. I feel it's a deep honor to be able to share in this evening with you all tonight. So the Light Up a Life ceremony is a simple, but I think a remarkable proceeding. We will be reading aloud the names tonight of those whom we've loved and have lost. In doing this, we'll be presenting an opportunity to transform the challenging feelings that come with that loss into the joy of a shared remembrance. In this way, the Light Up a Life event is a cultivation of a resilience that we can all hold together as a community. Before we begin, I'd like to share just a few brief thoughts with you all. So the central act of this evening will be the speaking of names. And I'd like to draw your attention to the small miracle that I think is our ability to speak to each other, the miracle of human speech. So if you think about this, inside each of us, individually and on our own, we are full of thoughts, feelings, and memories that we experience on our own, separate from everybody else around us. And even those that we are close to, we feel a deep connection to, we aren't able to necessarily make those inner feelings known, but by virtue of human speech, the utterance of a sound that comes out of our mouth will carry the meaning of those thoughts and feelings in such a way that those around us can know and understand what's going on inside of us. The pain of loss that we feel alongside the memories that we carry are experiences that we hold inside of ourselves. They're things that are within us, they are feelings, and they are fundamentally distinct and separate from everybody around us. But tonight, by speaking the names of those whom we've lost, we'll be able to free these inner feelings and memories to be shared amongst ourselves as a community. The weight of sadness and remembrance will be collectively held here tonight. And from our experience together here tonight, my hope is that we will feel a resilience as we look forward and step into the new year that's fast approaching. We'll be able to step into it hopefully with courage, hope, and joy.
Creator of the stars, source of all light, be present in this space this night as we pause to remember and to celebrate those whose lives brought light into our own. Fill us with the love that glows eternally and enable us to reflect and carry on the light into our community, into our world. Amen.
At this point, we will begin the reading of the names. I'd like to introduce now our four readers who are very important to us at Madrone Hospice. We have Susan Sorensen, who is an LVN and a field nurse and has been for a great many years. We have Paula Schmidt, who is our social worker. We have Corinne Medlin, who is our Director of Patient Care Services, and Lori Urudia, also an LVN who works in our hospice house. Thank you.
The first name is Mary Abreu, Gail Adams, Lloyd Adams, Joan Akana, Ralph Akana, Eden Charles Albino, Edith Aldridge, Carol Allen, Gary P. Allen, Alma Anderson, Elsie Anderson, Myra Anderson, Walter and Lily Anderson, Wes and Terry Andrews, Shirley Angelis, Sandra Aquila, Bill Arias, John Arsenault, Marilyn Arteries, Lion Marge Atlee, Edward June Athy, Barbara Autry, Robin Autry, Ralph Ayout, Jerry Bailey, Jamal Bailey, Bill Banks, Glenn and Betty Barnes, Linda and Terry Bates, Nancy Bacon, Jean and M. Bennick, Jason Bennick, Paul R. Berwick, Thomas A. Berwick, Bill Bezoin, George E. and Doris W. Betts, Hazel Billings, Henry Billings, Steve Blight, Ronald Black, Carol Bakley, Nita Blashaw, Marjorie Bly, Harland and Davida Block, Carl and Evie Bontrager, Elizabeth Bordessa, Ron Bortman, Stan Bowen, Gary Bowen, Carol Bozell, Chris Branham, Christopher Brass, Ernest and Mary Bridwell, Ethel Brosp, Jeanette Broyce, Glenn and Shirley Brotzman, Devon Brown, Elmer A. Brown, Shirley Brown, Susan Brown, Rita Brunner, Scott Bryan, Harry and Mary Ellen Bryan, Wesley Burns, Jean Burrer, Tim Burton, Selma Butler, Jean Callahan, Tom Callison, Terry Calvary, Howard Cameron, Floyd Carbaugh, Adele, Adeline and Frank Cardoza, Barbara Carlson, John Carlson, Jim Carrier, Matthew Carroll, Jim Carter, Pat and Evelyn Carter, Torchy and Pat Carter, Joseph Castile, Clarice Catani, Jim Calkins, Catherine Caven, Edward Chambers, Robert Chambers, Ruth Chapman, Catherine Marie Chayado, Frank Christ, Kathleen Clapman, John and Linda Clayton, Cloyd Leghorn, Robert and Jeanette Clifford, Lloyd Coatney, Alliance Rolla Colburn, Doreen Coleman, Jim and Jan Codowak, June and Jerry Collins, Margaret and Verna Colney, Sean and Michael Connor, Helen Cook, Robert Cool, Phyllis Cooper, Goldman Cothran, Carol Catani, Robert Cox Sr., Wander Cozine, Ace Casalio, Jan Casalio, Craig Kramer, Don Crawford, Joanne Crushrew, Thomas Crocker, George A. Crawwell, Paul A. Crowell, Carmine Crunch, Mildred Diaz, Jan Darling, Kelly Davis, Robert D'Avila, Marilyn Denise, Ed Delaney, Georgianne DeMarco, Linda Derby Robinson, Steve DeRose, Louis DeRoss, Ruby and Tom DeSouza, Vina and George DeSouza, Lily and Dick, James Dobbs, Gerald A. Dobson, Dobby, Vicky Doak, Dale Downey, Patricia Downward, Elizabeth Drudge, Larry Drudge, August and Margaret DeCalla, Rosemary Dunaway, Albert Dunlap, Rhonda Dunlap, Roy Dunlap, Bert and Vera Durling, and Clancy Dutra.
Helen Easton, Joseph Eckhar, Dennis Eglin, James A. Eller, Fritz Donald Eller, Norma Ellis, Richard Enos, Joanne Evans, Neil Evans, Brenda Fahrenkrug, Stephen Fayette, Kay Farmer, Lion Robert Bob Thier, Frank and Isabel Fine, Stacy Finks, Evelyn and Martin Finesse, Richard and Viola Finwell, Everett and Siski Fayok, Lion Martha Fisher, Daniel Flanagan, Nancy Flanham, Clay Fleck, June Fleck, Jeanette Flower, Chelsea Forrest, Larry Foster, Ben Foster, Larry and Maxine Foster, John Folk, Harry Faust, Charles Frank, Dennis Thomas Franks, Robert Freeman, Freeman family, Ernest Freitas, Floyd Frost, Larry Galbert, Audrey Galbraith, Natasha Galbraith Humphrey, Tish Gallagher, Dawn Garland, Selma George, Gina Giacomelli, Diana Gibson, Richard Gifford, Jack Gillick, Tina and Rafael Gliato, Don Gomez, Robert Goodwin, Phyllis Gardnier, Daryl Grace, Lynn Graham, Rebecca Graham, Frank and Mildred Graves, Roberta Green, Jay Grenvik, Sandy Goose, Jim Geyer, John Haas, Albert Hackett, Johnny W. Howe, John Harmon, David Hawks, Jerry Hayes, Carolyn Hughes, Carol Hill, William H. Hill, Leonard Hillstad, Charlotte and Austin Hockaday, Chuck Hockaday, Ted Hockaday, Richard Thomas Horn, William Robbie Horn, Eileen Holcomb, W.D. Red Houston, Willia Hudson, Orville Huffman, Roy and Pat Hull, Mason Hillquist, Carol Humble, Peggy Hume, Lori Hunter, Nancy Jameson Hunter, Jane Eller Hunter, George Hurd, Red and Helen Hurd, Angie Hurst, Peter Infelice, John Isbell, Miles John Isbell, Laura Israel, Alan Iverson, John Jackson, Dick Jansen, Phil and Clara Jansen, Dean Jefferson, Jean Jefferson, Joan Jefferson, Kay Jefferson, Pat Jefferson, Lion Joan Jostin, John Jones, June Jones, Nada Jones, Jack A. Jones, Melba I. Jones, Mildred Jones, Ronald Jordan, Rosalie Jorgensen, Norma Jorgensen, George K., Janie Kaiser, Gilbert Kelmore, Mark Kelso, Lion Donna Kendall, Lion Laverne Kendall, Jill Kendrick, Levon Kent, Margaret Kerr, Bob Dad King, Donald Pete King, Robert King, Jean King, Natalie Clem, Johanna Kleinhammer, Rusty Knapp, Shirley Knapp, Donald Coles, Spud Kuhn, Teresa Kuhn, Ben and Norma Corda, Bill and Susie Corda, Corda family, Earl Knott, Debbie Cottonbaugh, Bill Kruger Sr., Karen Lacombe, Richard J. Lacombe, M.D., Sue Ladd, Amy Lynn LaGrange, David Lamar, Linda Lang,
Valerie Lang, Ray and Bernadine Langford, Ben and Millie Lornette, Cindy Lavisser, Edna Lavisser, Dwayne Lawrence, Lenora Lawrence, Ruth Lawson, Harold and Ruth Leal, Loretta Lemus, David E. Lemus, Jean Lesko, Charles D. Lovelett, Kathy Levy, Evelyn Leggett, Bob and Betty Lytle, Lion Robert Bob Lindsay, Laura Longmore, Trey Longmore, Maureen Loomis, Dr. Roger and Betty Lukes, Louis and Calla Lukes, Marty Allen Lukes, Marjorie A. Looper, Mary Ann Looper, Steve Lyman, Jack Richard McGowan, Tony and Bernice Machado, Maggie McGuire, George A. Mankins, Gisela Manley, David March, Dennis March, Elsie March, Manuel Marie, Lion D. Marshner, Lion Ray Marshner, Dawn Marsh, Evelyn G. Martin, Dora Martin, James and Celia Martinez, Lala Martinez, Rick Matthews, Tony Mateos, Joseph Moz, John McCarthy, Rex McClung, Kearney McConnell, Lion Billy Joe McCauley, Lion Trish McCauley, Bill and Gloria McDonald, Leon McFadden, Erica McHenry, Robert Mears, Debbie Medlin, Nancy Newton Miners, Leah Mello, George Miles, Bob Miller, Bob and Enid Miller, Peggy Millington, Mary Minehan, Christopher Moore, Alan Morgan, Clarence Morgan, Jack and Catherine Morgan, Curtis Morton, Lion Libby Moyer, Lion Richard Moyer, Deborah Munoz, Robert Munson, Robert and Elaine Neal, Lion William Neiswinger, Curtis Nietzsche, Velma Nelson, Brian Nelson, June Nettles, Dr. Albert Newton, Genevieve Newton, Sally Noonan, Greg Northrup, Umberto V. Nunez, Swan and Ellen Nyberg, Eleanor Nystrom, Bob and Silva O'Connor, Robert and Hazel Oland, Joan O'Neill, Robert and Edna Orr, Lion Harry Page, Lion Marion Page, Randy Parker, Jerry Parks, Muriel Rusty Pastrana, John Patterson, Blanche Peabody, Thomas Pease, Scott Pendergast, Dean Perdue, Neil and Dorothy Perret, Suzanne Perret, Ann H. Perkins, Randy Peters, Lion Walter Peters, Nels Peterson, Ruth Peterson, Daniel Pettit, Jack and Elta Phelps, Byron Phillips, Lion Richard Pies, Sandy Pingator, David Pauley, Gordon Porter, Barbara Presley, Wes Pugh, Janie Quigley, Betty Randaski, Catherine Regas, Rich Regas, Richard Regas, John Raffenschneider, Donna Rainey, Richard Ralston, Marcia Ramsdale, Pepe Reyes Ortez, Bethel Richardson, Kevin Rickey, Merwin and Dorothy Rickey, Lindy Rife, Tamara K. Rivaler, James and Joanne Rivera, Susan Nelson Robertson, Daisy Roberts, Danny Lee Roberts, Dottie Roberts, Ernie and Jeanette Roberts, Irene Roberts, Thomas James Roberts, Rodney Robinson, Evelyn Roderm, Julie Roderm, Barbara Roan, James Rowland, Joanne Romney, Lion Richard Dick Romney.
Bob Ross, Red and Alice Ross, Zoe Rossetto, Thomas Ruff, J. Robert Rush, Kim Rushton, Layla Russell, Fred and Cicera Silvestrin, Fred Silvestrin, Adolph Sandall, Albert Sandall, Marlene Sandall, Bill and Betty Sanford, Charles Sarmento, Clifford and Betty Sarr family, Pete and Vera Scala, Lion Mike Schaefer, Donna J. Schmidt, Paul S. Schmidt Jr., Colonel Paul S. Schmidt Sr., Carolyn Schultz, Lee Shriver, James Seymour, Donald H. Shaw, Helen and Leonard Shelton, Eric Shorter, Richard Silva, Fredeline Seamus, Chuck, Nellie, and Brad Seamus, Carrie Seamus, Marianne C. and Ruby G. Simmons, Debbie Simons, Margie and George Smith, Robert Bob Smith, Sharon Smith, Vernon Smith, Vernon O. Smith, Dan and Mark Soares, Stan Solis, Oliver Linville Solis, Warren and Joyce Sorensen, Alan Soule, John Spencer, Harold and Pauline Spencer, John Paul Spencer, Jean Spencer, Stuart and Jean Square, Greg Stafford, LaWanda Starling, Josiah Stevens, Teresa Stidham, Shirley Stransky, Robert Lee Strickland, Donnie Stuckert, Archie Stumbow, Deller Summerlin, Patricia Sumner, Pete and June Suter, Dennis Swink, Bert Silva, David Buzz Silva, Francis Silva, Sylvia and Leonard Silva, Agnes Sylvia, Mary Taylor, Jim Thompson, Michael Thompson, Thomas Thompson, Ron Tickle, Gary Tickner, Wyman Trethway, Raymond Ray Triger, Chuck and Mary Tucker, Dorothy Turner, Dina Umbarger, Robert Underwood, David Vallow, Lion Viola Vanover, Lion Wilbur Vanover, Gloria Vero, Josephine Victorine, Lily Victorine, Gerald Wade, G.C. Wales, Betty Walker, Jim Walker, Imogene Jean Wasson, David Webster, Ingelore and Ernest Weinberg, Howard and Audrey Wells, Jack Wells, Marion Wells, Kermit and Babe Wheeler, Harry Whipple, Gary Whitehouse, Kelly Whitman, Lion Gary Wiley, Carl and Esther Wilkins, Suzanne Elizabeth Wilkins, William Bill Wilkins, Ruby Williams, Anna Willis, Jared Wilmarth, Ben Wilmarth, Ben and Virginia Wilmarth, Tip and Eleanor Wilmarth, George and Harleen Wilson, Terry Wilson, Carol Woodrich, Kenneth Woods, Frank Woodward, Kathy Woodward, J.R. Workman, Joe Henry Yeager, Patsy Young, Mick Young, Young family, Doris, Jack, Wick, and Aunt Sis, Claire Zan, firefighters, law enforcement, and first responders, and all who have passed.
And now at this time, I'd like to invite the Wairika High School Vocal Ensemble.
I'm finding I can fly so high above with you. All across the world, the villages go by like trees, the rivers and the hills, the forests and the streets. Children gaze on, taken by surprise. Nobody down below believes their eyes. Surfing in the air, we're swimming in the frozen sky. We're drifting over icy mountains floating by. Children gaze on, taken by surprise. Nobody down below believes their eyes. Walking in the air, dancing in the daylight sky, and everyone who sees us greets us as we fly. We're walking in the air, we're walking in the air.
Thank you, Wairika High School Vocal Ensemble. That was beautiful. Glad you guys could make it. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Diana Starling, who'll share with us a poem and lead us in a moment of remembrance.
These candles are lit for our loved ones in heaven. Light a candle, see it glow. Think of me, and always know I have not left, I'm always there. Day or night, I'll hover near. Just like a flame that's out of sight, my light shines on, still glowing bright. When missing me, this time apart, you'll find my light within your heart. And now we will have a moment of silence as we remember our loved ones.